Hey there. Glad you could join us for this deep dive. Today we're tackling something a little different. We're going to be wading into educational theory. But trust me, it's going to be fascinating.
Oh, absolutely.
We're doing this for you because we know you're interested in understanding how we evaluate educational programs, especially in those high-stakes health professions. And this 2017 research article we've got from Medical Education called, get this, How Can Systems Engineering Inform the Methods of Program Evaluation in Health Professions Education? Whew! Well, it really throws open the doors to a whole new way of thinking about it, or at least it did for me.
It really does. It makes you think differently about how these programs are evaluated. I mean, often we look at the end results and we just want to know, can a graduate do X? But what this article wants us to wrap our heads around is that these programs, they're not static. They're living, breathing, constantly changing things.
Okay, so they're complex systems then,
They are complex systems, yeah.
which, I'll be honest, sounds a little intimidating.
It does sound a bit jargony, doesn't it? But honestly, you already get this.
Really?
Yeah, think about it this way. Think of a medical school program, right? Like a big bustling city.
Okay.
You've got different neighborhoods, which are like the departments. You've got transportation systems, think communication channels, and then you've got those unexpected events.
Like a big snowstorm that throws everything out of whack.
Exactly. A surprise snowstorm, a festival, even just a random traffic jam. Those are like emergent situations, things that can impact the entire ecosystem.
Okay, I like that analogy. So emergence, that's what we're talking about here.
Exactly. It's those unplanned outcomes, good or bad, that just bubble up from all those interactions happening within a system.
So it's not just about what we intend to happen in a program, but also about acknowledging all those other things that pop up along the way, for better or for worse.
You've got it. And to really understand those emergent elements, this article suggests we borrow a framework from, well, a bit of a surprising place.
Oh, systems engineering.
Engineering, really. Like building bridges engineering. I know. It sounds a little out there. But it's not about the concrete and steel. It's about understanding how any complex system works, whether it's launching a space shuttle or managing a classroom full of medical students.
Huh. Okay, I'm intrigued. So what do these systems engineers have to offer educators then?
Oh, they've got these fantastic tools for mapping out complexity. One of the coolest, and this is what we'll be unpacking today, is called the Abstract Decomposition Space, or ADS for short.
All right, you've piqued my curiosity with this ADS thing. Lay it on me.
Okay, so picture this. Imagine you have this incredibly detailed map, right?
Okay.
But here's the kicker. Instead of just zooming in on different locations, you can zoom in on levels of detail too. You can zoom out to see the whole country. That's like the overall goals of your program. Then zoom in to see the major highways. Those are your teaching methods. And then go all the way down to street level to see the individual buildings, which are like the nitty-gritty resources being used. That's what we call the abstraction dimension of ADS.
Okay, I think I'm starting to see how this works. But there's another dimension, right? Decomposition.
Right, and that's where we break down the system into its fundamental parts. So for our medical school example, it's looking at the teachers, the students, the curriculum, the tech they're using, even the broader culture of the school, all the pieces of the puzzle.
So it's like creating this multi-layered interactive model of the program. You can see how all these different pieces interact at these various levels of detail. That's amazing.
It is really cool, and it helps us see things we might miss otherwise.
But how do we actually use this ADS thing to understand those emergent elements?
Yeah.
You know, the stuff that wasn't part of the plan in the first place.
Well, let me give you an example. Let's say we're evaluating a suturing course.
Okay, yeah, for medical students.
Yeah, for medical students. Pretty standard part of a mid-school curriculum.
Right.
So using the ADS, we can zoom in on different aspects. At the very highest level, you have the overall goal. You know, students need to demonstrate proficiency in those basic suturing techniques, right?
Right. Makes sense.
But then you zoom in a bit closer to the teaching methods, and maybe you find out they're using that flipped classroom approach. Where students watch videos at home and then come in for some more hands-on practice.
So you're getting into the specifics of how that learning's happening.
Exactly. And then if we zoom in even further, down to the resource level, we might see they've got these really cool high-tech simulators they're using.
Oh, wow, yeah. I've heard about those. They mimic real human tissue, right?
Exactly.
Technology is amazing.
It really is.
I can already see where you're going with this, though. With all these different moving parts, you're bound to get some of those unexpected outcomes,
Yeah.
those emergent elements.
Exactly. So let's say, for example, the program planners, they really wanted this flipped classroom approach to make students into more independent learners, right?
Sure. A worthy goal for sure.
Absolutely. But here's the thing. When you actually observe those students, you might find that, well, instead of becoming more independent, they actually start forming these really strong study groups outside of class.
Interesting. So they're still becoming more collaborative learners. It's not exactly in the way the instructors initially pictured it.
Exactly. That's exactly it. And that right there, that's an emergent outcome, something the ADS helps us uncover.
That's so cool.
It might not be on the syllabus, but it's definitely influencing how these students are learning.
It's like you're pulling back the curtain and seeing all these hidden dynamics at play.
That's a great way to put it. And the best part is once you see these emerging elements, you can actually start to work with them.
Oh, interesting.
You can leverage them to get even better outcomes.
So instead of just evaluating a program based on what we hoped would happen, we can actually look at what is happening and use that to make things even better.
You got it. It's about being responsive, being adaptable, and recognizing that those unplanned outcomes, they can really hold the key to a program's true potential.
This is really making me rethink how we approach education.
Yeah.
But how do we know what's really emergent and not just part of the initial plan? I mean, even if it wasn't spelled out perfectly.
Yeah, that's a great question.
Is there some kind of formula we can use to figure that out?
There actually is.
Really?
Yeah. This article gives this really simple equation, but it's really elegant.
Okay.
So it says that emergent elements are equal to the total number of elements you observe minus the planned elements.
So anything we see happening that wasn't part of that initial blueprint for the program, that's emergence.
Exactly. But here's the thing, and this is important, emergence. It's not just about those unexpected outcomes, it's also about the lack of expected outcomes. Oh, I didn't think of it that way.
Yeah, and it's an important distinction. So going back to our suturing course, let's say one of the goals was to boost student confidence, right?
Sure, makes sense. Surgeons, they have to be confident.
Exactly. But what if after the course you surveyed those students and instead of feeling more confident, they actually felt less confident?
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's not good.
No, it's definitely a red flag.
Yeah.
And that absence of a planned outcome, that dip in confidence, that's also an emergent element. It's something that deserves our attention.
Okay, so we have to be tuned in to both the good and the bad.
Yeah.
It's not just about celebrating the happy accidents, those unexpected benefits, but also about noticing where our plans, even those well-thought-out plans, might be going off the rails a bit.
Yes, exactly. And that's another place where this ADS can come in handy.
It's like having a detective's magnifying glass.
Ah.
It lets us zoom in on those discrepancies and try to understand why they're happening.
This has been so eye-opening, but I think it's time we bring this back to our listeners a bit. You know, the folks out there who are passionate about training the next generation of healthcare providers, doctors, nurses, therapists, everyone. Why does all this matter so much?
Well, it matters because it gives us a much richer understanding of how these educational programs actually work. You know, it's not just a straight line from A to B.
It's like we're going beyond those old checklists and really embracing the dynamism, almost like the organic nature of learning, you know?
Yes, exactly. And when we can really start to see a program as this ecosystem of interactions, you realize we can actually design for emergence.
Well, hold on. Did you just say we can plan for the unplanned?
Well, in a way, yeah. It's less about predicting every little twist and turn and more about making sure there's enough flexibility built in, enough space for those unexpected outcomes to happen, to emerge organically.
So instead of being afraid of those emergent elements, those unplanned events, we can anticipate them, we can analyze them, maybe even harness them to actually improve how people learn.
Now you're getting it. It's about fostering those positive emergent outcomes, but also knowing how to address those negative ones when they pop up, because they will.
Okay, I get that in theory, but what would that look like in practice? How would an educator do that?
Okay, well, let's go back to our suturing example, right? So the instructors, they noticed that the flipped classroom, it didn't quite work the way they planned.
Right, students weren't suddenly these independent learners.
Right, but it did lead to those amazing study groups forming.
Yeah, which, if you remember, that was an unexpected but really positive emergent outcome.
Exactly. So instead of trying to force that initial plan, force them to be independent, maybe they lean into that emergent behavior.
Okay, I see where you're going with this.
Maybe they could build time into the class for those study groups to meet.
Provide them with some resources that are tailored for that kind of peer-to-peer learning.
Exactly. It's all about being adaptable, right? About being able to listen when the program's telling you something, even if it's not what you thought you wanted to hear.
This has been so helpful. I feel like I have a whole new way of seeing these programs now, of understanding not just how we evaluate them, but how we design them in the first place, how we keep them fresh, relevant.
And I think the biggest takeaway here is that learning itself, it's an emergent process.
Wow, yeah.
We can guide it, nurture it, we can try to steer it in certain directions, but we can't completely control it.
And maybe that's okay.
Exactly. And that, I think, is what makes this whole field so fascinating.
It really is. Well, on that note, I think it's time for our final provocative thought.
I love these.
Something to leave our listeners with. If we can have all of these emergent elements, all these little unintended consequences from something as, well, as seemingly straightforward as a suturing course, just imagine how complex it gets when we're talking about a whole medical school curriculum, or a residency program, or a whole healthcare system.
Makes you think, doesn't it? And I think it highlights how important it is to approach all of this, these complex systems, with a healthy dose of humility.
Yeah, and a willingness to adapt.
Absolutely. Because we are always learning, always adapting, and so are the programs that we create.
So much to think about. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive. We'll be back next time with another one. Until then, keep those brains engaged.